The steel plate hung motionless in the desert air, a defiant speck against the amber horizon. 2,000 yards away, the SEAL team had positioned themselves behind a rocky outcrop, their high-powered optics trained on what seemed like an impossible target. The distance stretched beyond the limits of conventional military engagement, beyond what most snipers would even attempt in perfect conditions. The wind was gusting at 15 knots, the heat shimmer distorted everything beyond 800 meters, and the target itself was barely visible to the naked eye. "Nobody hits that far," muttered Chief Petty Officer Martinez, adjusting his spotting scope for the third time. His voice carried the confident dismissal of a man who had seen the best shooters in the world fail at half this distance. The other members of SEAL Team 7 nodded in agreement, their weathered faces showing the kind of skepticism that comes from years of witnessing the boundaries of human capability. But something was different about this demonstration. The figure behind the rifle wasn't part of their usual circle of operators and military contractors. She was smaller than expected, her movements economical and precise as she settled into position behind a Barrett M82A1. Her uniform bore no special insignia, no ranger tabs or sniper badges that would immediately command respect. To the watching SEALs, she looked like another Pentagon pencil pusher trying to prove a point about new equipment or training protocols. The woman, later they would learn her call sign was Phantom, made no grand gestures or confident declarations. She simply checked her data book, a weathered notebook filled with handwritten calculations and atmospheric readings. Her fingers moved across the scope adjustments with the methodical precision of someone who had performed these actions thousands of times before. The SEALs watched with growing impatience as she took readings with a handheld anemometer, noted the temperature, and consulted what appeared to be ballistic charts covered in her own annotations. "Ma'am, with respect," Chief Martinez called out, "that target's at 2,100 yards. Even with perfect conditions, that's beyond the effective range of most military sniper systems." His tone was polite but carried the unmistakable suggestion that they were wasting valuable training time. Phantom didn't respond immediately. She was studying the mirage patterns dancing above the desert floor, watching how the heat waves bent and twisted the light. Her breathing had slowed to an almost meditative rhythm. The Barrett's bipod legs were perfectly positioned, the weapon's 29-pound mass distributed across the rocky ground in a way that spoke of intimate familiarity with the system. The silence stretched on, broken only by the whisper of wind across the desert and the distant hum of insects. Something in that stillness began to change the atmosphere around the observation post. The SEALs found themselves leaning forward, their casual dismissal gradually giving way to a different kind of attention. The morning sun climbed higher, and the steel plate continued to mock them from its impossible distance. 2,100 yards of desert air, heat shimmer and crosswind stood between the rifle and its target. According to every manual, every training protocol, and every voice of experience among the watching operators, this shot was beyond the realm of possibility. But Phantom had stopped consulting her notes. Her eye had found the scope, her finger had settled on the trigger, and something fundamental had shifted in the desert air. The SEALs didn't know it yet, but they were about to witness something that would challenge everything they thought they understood about the limits of precision shooting. The steel plate waited, unaware that it was about to become the center of a legend that would spread through special operations communities around the world. In the space between one heartbeat and the next, between the intake of breath and its release, the impossible was about to become inevitable. Chief Martinez lowered his spotting scope slightly, a frown creasing his sun-weathered features. Something about the woman behind the rifle had changed. The casual confidence he'd observed in countless shooters attempting to impress the teams was absent. In its place was something else entirely, a stillness that seemed to bend the very air around her position. "Range, 2,100 yards," Phantom's voice came across the radio, calm and matter-of-fact. No bravado, no hedge-betting qualifications. Just a simple statement of distance that hung in the desert air like a challenge to physics itself. The other SEALs had stopped their casual banter. Petty Officer Rodriguez, a sniper himself with over 300 confirmed kills across 4 deployments, found himself studying the woman's form through his own optics. Her position was textbook perfect, but there was something more, an integration between shooter and weapon that spoke of thousands of hours behind the scope. The way her left hand cradled the rifle stock, the angle of her right elbow, even the set of her shoulders suggested a level of familiarity that couldn't be faked. "Wind reading," Martinez called out, his tone shifting slightly. Professional curiosity was beginning to override his skepticism. "Variable, 3 to 5 knots left to right at my position, switching to 8 knots same direction at target." Her response was immediate and precise, the kind of atmospheric assessment that took years to develop. She paused, then added, "Thermal layer break at approximately 1,000 yards. Compensation factor 2.3. Rodriguez felt his eyebrows rise involuntarily. Thermal layer calculations were advanced ballistic considerations that most military snipers never bothered with. They were the province of competitive long-range shooters and the kind of precision marksmen who measured their accuracy in fractions of inches rather than center-mass hits. The Barrett remained motionless, Phantom's breathing pattern visible in the slight rise and fall of her shoulders. She had been in position for nearly 10 minutes now, her body seeming to merge with the rocky terrain. The rifle's massive muzzle brake pointed toward the distant target like an accusatory finger, challenging the conventional wisdom of maximum effective range. "Ballistic solution computed," she reported, her voice carrying across the comm system with the same emotional inflection one might use to announce the time. "Firing when ready." Chief Martinez found himself holding his breath. Around him, the other members of SEAL Team 7 had fallen silent, their usual running commentary replaced by an expectant tension. The morning desert stretched before them, shimmering with heat and possibility. In the distance, the steel plate hung like a question mark against the sky, waiting for an answer that most would consider impossible. The silence deepened, broken only by the whisper of wind across the sage brush and the distant cry of a hawk riding the thermals. Phantom's finger rested on the Barrett's trigger, her eye aligned with the scope's reticle, her breathing having slowed to the point where her chest barely moved. 2,100 yards away, the target waited, unaware that it was about to become the focal point of a demonstration that would redefine what the SEALs thought they knew about the outer limits of precision shooting. The moment stretched, poised between possibility and physics, between reputation and reality. Then, without warning or ceremony, the world exploded into noise and flame. The Barrett's muzzle brake redirected the tremendous blast of burning propellant gases, creating a concussion wave that hammered across the observation post. The sound was tremendous, not just loud but physical, a pressure wave that struck the watching SEALs like an invisible fist and left their ears ringing despite their hearing protection. But even as the thunder of the shot rolled across the desert, something impossible was already happening 2,100 yards downrange. The steel plate, that defiant speck of metal that had seemed untouchable in its distant perch, simply disintegrated. Not struck, not knocked aside, but completely destroyed in a shower of metallic fragments that sparkled in the morning sun like deadly confetti. The destruction was so complete, so sudden, that for a moment the SEALs couldn't process what they had witnessed. The plate had been there, hanging motionless in the shimmering air, and then it was gone, replaced by empty space and the fatting glitter of metal shards falling to the desert floor. "Holy shit," Rodriguez breathed, his voice barely audible over the ringing in his ears. Chief Martinez remained frozen behind his spotting scope, his eye pressed to the lens as if he could somehow rewind what he had just observed. The mathematical impossibility of what had occurred warred with the undeniable evidence of his own senses. 2,100 yards, variable wind conditions, extreme heat shimmer, And yet the target had been not just hit, but completely obliterated with a precision that defied everything he thought he knew about long-range shooting. Time of flight, 3.2 seconds, Phantom reported, her voice carrying the same calm professionalism as if she had just completed a routine training exercise. She was already working the Barrett's bolt, extracting the spent brass casing with movements that spoke of thousands of repetitions. Target eliminated. The brass casing hit the rocky ground with a metallic ping, the sound somehow audible despite the ringing in everyone's ears. Steam rose from the rifle's barrel, the heat of combustion creating visible distortion, waves in the already shimmering air. Phantom made a notation in her data book, recording the atmospheric conditions and results with the methodical precision of a scientist documenting an experiment. For several long seconds, nobody spoke. The SEALs stood or crouched behind their observation posts, trying to reconcile what they had witnessed with everything their training and experience had taught them about the limits of small arms effectiveness. The mathematics alone should have made the shot impossible. Bullet drop at that range would require extreme elevation adjustments. Wind drift would push the projectile several feet off target, and the thermal currents rising from the sun-baked desert floor should have made precise aiming impossible. Yet the evidence lay scattered across 2,100 yards of desert floor, metal fragments glinting in the morning sun, the empty space where a steel plate had hung moments before, and the gradually dissipating cloud of propellant gases that marked the location of an impossible shot made real. The silence stretched until it became uncomfortable, filled with the weight of assumptions being forcibly revised, and the sound of professional reputations being quietly reconsidered. Chief Martinez was the first to find his voice, though it came out rougher than he intended. "Ma'am," he stopped, cleared his throat, tried again. "Ma'am, I've been watching snipers for 15 years. That shot." He gestured helplessly toward the empty space where the target had been. "That shouldn't be possible." Phantom was field stripping the Barrett with practiced efficiency, her movements economical and precise. She didn't look up from her work when she replied, "The bullet doesn't know what's supposed to be impossible." It was a simple statement, delivered without arrogance or false modesty, but something in those words carried weight that went beyond their literal meaning. Rodriguez found himself studying the woman's profile, noting details he had missed during his initial dismissive assessment. The steady hands that manipulated the rifle's components with watchmaker precision. The weathered notebook filled with ballistic data and atmospheric readings. The worn patches on her uniform that spoke of time, spent in prone position behind a rifle scope. "Where did you train?" Martinez asked, professional curiosity overriding the stunned disbelief that had momentarily paralyzed his ability to speak. "Everywhere," came the reply, still matter of fact, still delivered without looking up from the weapon maintenance that occupied her attention. "Anywhere they'd let me shoot." The answer raised more questions than it answered, but there was something in her tone that suggested she wasn't being evasive. Rather, it seemed like the simple truth of someone whose expertise had been hard-won across multiple environments and countless hours of practice. The kind of truth that didn't need embellishment or explanation, because the results spoke for themselves. Petty Officer Rodriguez stepped forward, his own rifle forgotten as he tried to process the implications of what he had witnessed. "Ma'am, with respect, we need to know who trained you. That level of precision at that range under these conditions." He paused, searching for words that could adequately express the magnitude of what had just occurred. "We've worked with the best shooters in the military. Marine Scout snipers, Army Special Forces, Delta operators. Nobody hits that far. Nobody." Phantom finished reassembling the Barrett's bolt group and finally looked up, meeting Rodriguez's gaze directly. Her eyes were the color of winter sky, pale blue and absolutely steady. There was no pride in them, no satisfaction at having impressed the SEALs. Instead, there was something else, a depth that suggested experiences beyond the reach of conventional military training. "Call signs Phantom," she said simply, And you're right, nobody hits that far. She paused, shouldering the Barrett with movements that made the 29-pound rifle look weightless. But I'm not nobody. The desert wind picked up, stirring dust devils across the training range, and carrying with it the metallic scent of gun smoke and the ozone smell of superheated air. In the distance, maintenance personnel were already moving toward the impact area to assess the damage and reset targets for the next training evolution. But everyone present understood that what had just occurred couldn't be reset or repeated on command. They had witnessed something that existed at the intersection of skill, experience, and something indefinable that couldn't be taught in any training program or replicated through equipment alone. 2,100 yards of impossible had just become inevitable, and the woman responsible was already walking away, her rifle slung across her shoulder and her data book tucked under her arm. Chief Martinez found himself staring at the empty space where the steel plate had hung, his mind already working through the implications of what he had witnessed. In the special operations community, word traveled fast. A shot like this, made under these conditions, would become legend within days. But more than that, it raised questions about the shooter herself, who she was, where she had come from, and what other capabilities she might possess that hadn't yet been demonstrated. The morning sun climbed higher, baking the desert floor and sending heat shimmer dancing across the training range. But the memory of what had just occurred would remain crystal clear in the minds of everyone who had witnessed it. 2,100 yards, variable wind, extreme heat, and a single shot that had redefined what they thought possible. As the SEALs began packing their equipment and preparing to return to base, each man carried with him the knowledge that they had just witnessed something extraordinary. The kind of shooting that existed more in legend than reality, performed by a woman whose quiet confidence had turned skepticism into stunned respect in the space of a single trigger pull. The plate was gone, scattered across the desert floor in countless fragments, but the questions it had raised were just beginning. The ride back to base was unusually quiet, the usual post-training banter replaced by the kind of thoughtful silence that follows moments of genuine surprise. Chief Martinez sat in the passenger seat of the lead Humvee, his eyes fixed on the desert landscape rolling past, but his mind replaying the impossible shot he had just witnessed. Behind him, the other members of SEAL Team 7 were equally subdued, each processing what they had seen through the lens of their own extensive combat experience. Rodriguez broke the silence first, his voice carrying a note of professional bewilderment. "Chief, in all your time with the teams, have you ever seen anything like that?" Martinez considered the question carefully before responding. "I've seen some incredible shooting over the years. Marine snipers in Fallujah taking out targets at 1,200 meters in urban environments. Army Special Forces guys in Afghanistan making shots across valleys that seemed impossible. But that," he paused, shaking his head, "that was something else entirely." The Humvee hit a bump in the desert road, jarring everyone inside, but nobody complained. Their minds were elsewhere, trying to reconcile the morning's demonstration with everything they thought they knew about the limits of small arms effectiveness. The mathematics alone should have made the shot impossible. At 2,100 yards, a standard military round would drop nearly 30 feet due to gravity alone, requiring extreme elevation adjustments that would put the shooter far outside normal engagement parameters. "What kind of ammunition was she using?" asked Petty Officer Thompson from the back seat. He was the team's designated marksman, responsible for precision shooting at extended ranges, and the technical aspects of what he had witnessed were bothering him more than the simple fact of its occurrence. "Looked like standard military ball," Martinez replied, though uncertainty crept into his voice. "But at that range, with those conditions, standard ball shouldn't have the accuracy to completely destroy a target. The bullet would be subsonic by the time it reached 2,100 yards, the ballistic coefficient would be working against precision, and the wind drift alone." He trailed off, realizing that he was trying to apply conventional ballistic theory to something that had clearly transcended conventional limitations. The evidence was undeniable. They had all seen the plate disintegrate under the impact of a single, perfectly placed shot. But the implications of that evidence challenged fundamental assumptions about what was possible with standard military equipment in the hands of even the most skilled operator. Maybe it wasn't standard ammunition, Thompson suggested. Maybe she was using match-grade rounds, or some kind of specialized long-range projectile we haven't seen before. Rodriguez turned in his seat to face the other men. Doesn't matter what ammunition she was using. The atmospheric conditions alone should have made that shot impossible. The heat shimmer was severe enough to distort everything beyond 800 meters. The wind was gusting and variable, and she made those calculations in her head without computer assistance or advanced meteorological equipment. The implications of that observation settled over the vehicle like a heavy blanket. Modern military snipers relied on sophisticated equipment to make long-range shots, laser rangefinders, ballistic computers, advanced weather monitoring systems. The idea that someone could make the kinds of calculations required for a 2,100-yard shot using nothing more than a handheld anemometer and personal observation was almost as impressive as the shot itself. "Who do you think she is?" Thompson asked, voicing the question that had been haunting all of them since the demonstration ended. "I mean, where does someone learn to shoot like that?" Martinez had been wondering the same thing throughout the drive back to base. Military snipers were products of extensive training programs with well-documented progressions and known capabilities. But Phantom's shooting had demonstrated a level of skill that seemed to exist outside normal institutional frameworks. The precision, the atmospheric calculations, the casual confidence with which she had approached an impossible shot. It all suggested experience and training that went beyond conventional military programs. "Could be a contractor," he suggested, though his tone indicated he didn't entirely believe it himself. "Some of the private military companies employ shooters with specialized capabilities, or maybe she's with one of the alphabet agencies, CIA, NSA, someone with access to training programs we don't know about." But even as he spoke, Martinez realized that explanation didn't entirely fit what they had witnessed. Government contractors and agency operators were typically products of military training programs themselves, with skill sets that, while impressive, remained within predictable parameters. What they had seen that morning had been something different, a demonstration of capability that seemed to exist at the intersection of technical skill and something more intuitive, more personal. The base came into view ahead of them, its familiar structures rising from the desert floor like a small city dedicated to the science of warfare. Guard towers and communication arrays, equipment yards and training facilities, all of it representing the institutional knowledge and accumulated expertise of decades of military development. Yet everything they had just witnessed suggested that true mastery might exist outside those institutional boundaries, in the hands of individuals whose capabilities transcended organizational limitations. As they approached the main gate, Martinez found himself thinking about the quiet confidence with which Phantom had approached her impossible shot. No boasting, no dramatic gestures, just the methodical precision of someone who understood exactly what she was capable of and had no need to justify or explain it to anyone else. That kind of self-assurance couldn't be taught in any training program he knew of. It had to be earned through experience and tested under conditions that most shooters would never voluntarily encounter. The guards waved them through the gate with casual familiarity, unaware that the men in the vehicle were returning from a demonstration that would become the subject of countless conversations and speculation in the days to come. Within hours, word of the impossible shot would begin spreading through the special operations community, growing in the telling until it achieved the status of legend. But for now, it remained their secret. shared only among the men who had witnessed it firsthand and the mysterious woman who had made it possible. And as they drove toward the team headquarters to debrief and file their reports, each man carried with him the knowledge that he had seen something that challenged everything he thought he knew about the limits of human capability and precision shooting. The morning had started as a routine training evolution. It was ending with questions that would haunt them for weeks to come. The debriefing room at SEAL Team 7 headquarters was a sterile, windowless space dominated by a large conference table and walls covered with tactical maps and operational photographs. Chief Martinez sat at the head of the table, his after-action report open in front of him, but the words on the page seemed inadequate to describe what had occurred during the morning's training evolution. How do you document the impossible in military terminology that demands precision and factual accuracy? The other members of the team occupied chairs around the table, their usual post-training energy replaced by a contemplative quiet that was becoming increasingly uncomfortable. Rodriguez drummed his fingers against the table surface, a nervous habit that indicated his mind was working through problems that didn't have easy solutions. Thompson stared at his own notes, trying to find language that would accurately convey the technical impossibility of what they had witnessed without sounding like he was fabricating details. So, Martinez began, his voice carrying the weight of command responsibility. We need to discuss what we saw out there today, and more importantly, what we're going to put in our reports. The statement hung in the air like a challenge. Military after-action reports were official documents, subject to review by multiple levels of command, and potentially used as the basis for training modifications, equipment evaluations, and tactical doctrine development. But how do you officially document a demonstration that defied established ballistic theory and challenged fundamental assumptions about the limits of small arms effectiveness? Chief, Rodriguez said, leaning forward in his chair, if we report exactly what we saw, people are going to think we're making it up. A 2,100-yard shot in those conditions, with what appeared to be standard equipment, it reads like fiction. But we all saw it, Thompson interjected. All 6 of us witnessed the same thing. The plate was there, she fired once. The plate was gone. That's not subjective observation, that's documented fact. Martinez nodded slowly, understanding the dilemma his team was facing. Military culture valued accuracy and credibility above almost everything else. A report that seemed to exaggerate or embellish details could damage reputations and undermine future credibility. But failing to accurately document what had occurred would be equally problematic, particularly if the shooting demonstration had implications for operational planning or tactical doctrine. The question isn't whether we report what we saw, he said finally. The question is how we report it in a way that serves the teams and doesn't get us flagged as unreliable observers. He opened his laptop computer and pulled up the standard after-action report template, its familiar fields and formatting representing decades of institutional knowledge about how to document training evolutions and operational outcomes. But none of the standard categories seemed adequate for describing a demonstration that existed outside normal parameters of evaluation. Let's start with the facts, Martinez continued, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. Range to target 2,100 yards confirmed by laser measurement. Weather conditions, temperature 96 degrees Fahrenheit, wind variable 3 to 8 knots, extreme heat shimmer beyond 800 meters. Ammunition appeared to be standard military ball, though we didn't verify specifics. He paused, looking around the table at his team members. Target engagement, single shot, complete destruction of steel plate target. Time of flight approximately 3 seconds. Shooter identification, unknown female, call sign Phantom, demonstrated advanced ballistic calculation capabilities. The words appeared on the screen with mechanical precision, each fact documented in the kind of clinical language that military reports demanded. But reading them back, Martinez realized that the factual account somehow missed the essential truth of what they had witnessed. The casual confidence, the methodical precision, the sense that they were observing capabilities that existed far outside normal operational parameters. "Chief," Rodriguez said, his voice thoughtful, "maybe the technical details aren't the most important part of this report." Martinez looked up from his laptop, eyebrows raised in question. "I mean," Rodriguez continued, "we're SEALs. We're supposed to be experts in unconventional warfare and special operations. If there's someone out there with capabilities that exceed our understanding of what's possible, shouldn't Command be aware of that? Shouldn't they know that there are shooters operating at levels we didn't think existed?" The observation struck at the heart of their dilemma. SEAL teams existed to push the boundaries of what was considered possible in military operations. They were trained to think beyond conventional limitations and find solutions to problems that seemed unsolvable. But what they had witnessed that morning suggested that their own understanding of those boundaries might be incomplete. "You're right," Martinez said, deleting the clinical language he had been typing and starting over. "This isn't just about documenting a training evolution. This is about documenting capabilities that could have operational implications." He began typing again, this time focusing not just on the technical details of the shot, but on its implications for understanding the current state of precision shooting capabilities within the broader military and contractor community. If Phantom represented a level of skill that was more widely available than they had realized, it could change assumptions about battlefield effectiveness and tactical planning. "We need to know who she is," Thompson said, voicing what all of them were thinking. "We need to know where she trained, what her background is, and whether there are others with similar capabilities." Martinez nodded, adding those questions to his report as priority items for follow-up investigation. But even as he typed, he found himself wondering whether they would ever get satisfactory answers. Something about Phantom's demeanor had suggested that her story wasn't the kind that would be found in standard military personnel files or contractor databases. The room fell silent again as each man contemplated the implications of what they had witnessed and what it might mean for their understanding of their own capabilities and limitations. Outside, the afternoon desert heat was building toward its daily peak, but inside the air-conditioned briefing room, the temperature seemed to have dropped several degrees. They had started the morning thinking they understood the boundaries of what was possible in precision shooting. They were ending it with the realization that those boundaries might be far more flexible than they had ever imagined. Within 48 hours of the training demonstration, word of the impossible shot had spread through the special operations community with the speed and persistence of wildfire. It began with casual conversations in team rooms and expanded into formal briefings in command centers, each retelling adding new details and speculation while the core facts remained stubbornly consistent. 2,100 yards, variable wind, complete target destruction, single shot. At Fort Bragg, members of Delta Force gathered around coffee stations and equipment lockers, discussing the implications of what their SEAL counterparts had witnessed. At Quantico, Marine Scout sniper instructors pulled out ballistic charts and tried to reverse engineer the shooting solution that would have been required for such a shot. At the Special Operations Command headquarters in Tampa, intelligence analysts began running searches through classified databases, looking for any reference to a shooter with the call sign Phantom. The searches came up empty. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah McKenzie, commanding officer of the Army's Special Operations Sniper School, stood in her office overlooking the training ranges, where some of the military's most elite marksmen honed their skills. In her 15 years of developing precision shooting programs, she had seen the gradual evolution of long-range capabilities, the steady progression of equipment and techniques that had pushed effective engagement ranges from 800 meters to 1,200, and in exceptional cases, 1,500 meters. But 2,100 yards, nearly 2 kilometers, represented a quantum leap beyond anything in her experience or institutional knowledge. "Colonel," her aide announced from the doorway, "you have a secure call from SEAL Team 7. Mackenzie picked up the red phone, its encrypted connection crackling slightly as the call connected. Chief Martinez's voice came through clearly, though she could hear the strain of someone trying to maintain professional composure while discussing something that challenged his fundamental understanding of his profession. "Ma'am, we need to talk about yesterday's demonstration," Martinez began without preamble. "What we witnessed out here has implications that go beyond normal training evaluation." "Chief, I've been hearing rumors about this shot for the past day and a half," Mackenzie replied. "Frankly, some of what I'm hearing sounds like the kind of stories that grow in the telling. Help me separate fact from fiction." There was a long pause before Martinez responded, and when he did, his voice carried the weight of someone who understood that his credibility was on the line. "Ma'am, I've been in special operations for 18 years. I've worked with the best shooters in every branch of the military. I know the difference between impressive shooting and impossible shooting. What we saw yesterday was impossible shooting that somehow happened anyway." Mackenzie felt a chill run down her spine despite the warm afternoon air flowing through her office windows. Martinez's reputation was unassailable. He was known throughout the community as a straight shooter who didn't exaggerate or embellish. If he was saying the shot had been impossible, then it probably had been. "Tell me exactly what you observed," she said, pulling out a notepad and preparing to document details that might have operational significance. Martinez's account was methodical and precise, delivered in the clinical language of someone accustomed to providing accurate battlefield reports under extreme conditions. Range, wind speed, atmospheric conditions, ammunition type, target engagement results, each detail documented with the kind of precision that military professionals demanded from each other. But as Mackenzie listened, she found herself struggling with the same cognitive dissonance that had plagued the SEALs since witnessing the demonstration. The facts were clear and consistent, reported by multiple trained observers with impeccable credentials. But the implications of those facts challenged fundamental assumptions about ballistic physics and human capability. "Chief," she said when Martinez finished his account, "I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I need a direct answer. Is there any possibility that what you witnessed was some kind of demonstration using non-standard equipment? Advanced ammunition, modified weapons, electronic assistance that wasn't immediately apparent?" Another long pause then. "Ma'am, we considered all those possibilities. The rifle appeared to be a standard Barrett M82A1. The ammunition looked like military ball. The shooter used basic meteorological instruments, handheld anemometer, temperature gauge, basic spotting scope. No computer assistance, no advanced targeting systems that we could identify." "What about the shooter herself? Any information on background, training history, organizational affiliation?" "That's where things get interesting," Martinez replied, and Mackenzie could hear a note of frustration creeping into his voice. "Call sign Phantom, but no other identification. Our personnel databases don't show anyone with that designation. Contract rosters come up empty. Even our intelligence contacts are drawing blanks." Mackenzie felt her eyebrows rise involuntarily. In the interconnected world of special operations, anonymity was difficult to maintain. Shooters with exceptional capabilities were known quantities, their reputations preceding them through formal and informal networks that spanned military branches and contract organizations. The idea that someone could demonstrate capabilities this extraordinary while remaining completely unknown suggested either sophisticated operational security or origins outside normal institutional frameworks. "Colonel," Martinez continued, "there's something else. The way she approached the shot, the calculations she made, the atmospheric assessments, it wasn't standard military procedure. It was something else, something more intuitive but also more precise, like she was working from knowledge bases that our training programs don't address. The observation sent another chill through Mackenzie's professional consciousness. Military training programs were designed to be comprehensive, covering every aspect of precision shooting from basic marksmanship through advanced ballistic theory. The idea that there might be knowledge or techniques beyond institutional understanding was both fascinating and deeply troubling. "Chief, I'm going to make some calls," she said finally. "This needs to be elevated to people with access to information beyond our normal channels. In the meantime, I want you and your team to document everything you can remember about this demonstration. Every detail, no matter how insignificant it might seem." After ending the call, Mackenzie sat in her office chair and stared out at the training ranges where soldiers practiced the precision shooting techniques that represented the cutting edge of military capability. But somewhere out there, apparently, was a shooter whose capabilities existed beyond that cutting edge, in territories that remained unmapped by institutional knowledge. She reached for her secure phone again, preparing to make calls that would elevate the Phantom question to levels of command and intelligence analysis that might have answers to questions that were beginning to keep her awake at night. The secure conference room in the Pentagon's E-ring buzzed with the kind of tension that accompanied briefings on matters that didn't fit neatly into established categories of understanding or threat assessment. Around the polished table sat representatives from multiple agencies and military branches, each bringing their own perspective to a puzzle that seemed to resist conventional analysis. General Patricia Hawkins, Director of Special Operations, occupied the chair at the head of the table, her weathered features reflecting decades of experience with unconventional warfare and the kind of problems that didn't appear in standard military textbooks. To her right sat Colonel James Richardson from the Defense Intelligence Agency, his laptop open to classified files that had yielded frustratingly little information despite extensive searches across multiple databases. "Ladies and gentlemen," General Hawkins began, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to dealing with situations that challenged conventional understanding. "We're here to discuss a shooting demonstration that occurred 72 hours ago at the Naval Special Warfare Training Facility in Nevada. The details of this demonstration have implications that extend beyond normal training evaluation." She activated the room's secure display system, showing a satellite image of the Nevada training range with distance markers overlaid in precise military symbology. A red dot marked the shooting position, while another dot, positioned 2,100 meters away, indicated the target location. At 8:47 hours local time, an unidentified shooter engaged a steel plate target at a range of 2,100 meters, Hawkins continued. Weather conditions included variable wind up to 8 knots, temperature 96 degrees Fahrenheit, and severe atmospheric distortion due to heat shimmer. The target was completely destroyed with a single shot. Colonel Richardson leaned forward, his expression reflecting the skepticism that had characterized most initial reactions to reports of the demonstration. "General, with respect, 2,100 meters exceeds the maximum effective range of most military sniper systems by several hundred meters. Even under perfect conditions, such a shot would be extremely difficult for our most capable operators." "Which is exactly why we're having this conversation," Hawkins replied. "The shot was witnessed by 6 members of SEAL Team 7, all of whom are experienced combat veterans with extensive knowledge of precision shooting capabilities. Their accounts are consistent and detailed." She advanced to the next slide, showing a ballistic trajectory chart with calculations that stretched across the projected display in precise mathematical curves. The numbers were sobering. At 2,100 meters, a standard military round would drop nearly 30 feet due to gravity alone, requiring elevation adjustments that would put the shooter far outside normal engagement parameters. The mathematical challenges of this shot are significant, continued Hawkins. Bullet drop, wind drift, atmospheric density variations.